intro. Look at that video. That is looking sharp. Shout out to the team for making that and putting it together. And that way you get to see a cool video instead of just my ugly mug right when we start the podcast there. But welcome in, newest edition of Caught Stealing, the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball podcast. I'm Colby Conway at Colby R. Conway over on X. And with me here, the Selz man over on X. But first, I'm going to say the Super Bowl winning the Selz man over on X. So, Matt, congratulations on your Super Bowl victory. I hope you enjoyed the game. I enjoyed that the under cashed last night. So, I guess we both won in different ways.
It did. But it was funny because I thought that they had changed the rule that you have to, even if it doesn't matter for the game, that you have to kick the extra point after the game-winning touchdown just to keep, like, everything, kosher with the spread and whatever. And so when the Chiefs got the ball back, I was looking at my friend, I was like, they score a touchdown, it goes to 25-22, which is 47 points. But by rule, I'm pretty sure they have to kick the extra point, which would then make it 26-22, which would have meant 48 hits. So it was good. But I guess in overtime, it doesn't really. I think in regular play, you have to do it, but in overtime, it doesn't. So, yeah, it was clearly on me switching shirts at halftime. The first shirt that I put on wasn't good mojo, apparently. So I switched shirts. You're welcome, Chiefs Nation. Clearly, my baseball superstition is bleeding into my NFL fandom. But I'm good. You know what happens now, though? Now that the Super Bowl is over, we get like pitchers and catchers.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The conclusion of the big game only means one thing, and that it's pitchers and catchers reporting. The majority of teams have their guys reporting on Valentine's Day, which is my birthday, and Wednesday of this week. Yep, 2 days from the time that you're listening to this here. So that is right around the corner. And that also means, Matt, we're going to be in the beautiful time of best shape of their lives. Guys come in looking good. The guys that maybe, there's some body transformations. We're going to have to decipher all of those tweets. So maybe what we'll do moving forward is if we can, maybe you and I can work to compile like a list of every time it happens, or at least close to it, and then just rapid fire. So it'll be like,
I mean, it's already been happening because,
true.
mean, Vladito can legitimately say it because that man got svelte. Like, nice job. But all of these pitch slab dudes, the guys who go to Driveline, I saw a tweet that Dylan Tate is pumping 100 now because he's at Driveline.
That's what we need to do. We should like screenshot like posts on X, put them in like a PowerPoint, just go through real quick rapid fire. Does this matter? Yay or nay? Vladito, best shape of his life, yay or nay? Bieber's increased velocity at Driveline, yay or nay? Just go through it real rapid fire, no analysis, just going through it. But pitchers and catchers is right around the corner. Very excited for that to start actually talking about actual tangible baseball. You know what I mean? It's one of those things of we can do all this hypothetical. Let's actually see Yamamoto on the mound. Let's actually see Imanaga on the mound in spring training, see how things look from there. But Matt, every offseason, it seems like as the offseason goes on, we're waiting for the big dominoes to fall. And it always seems that Scott Boras is involved. When you look at some of the big names left, guess who they all happen to be clients of? Guess who's very well known for trying to get every last penny available per contract? So let me ask you here first, with some of these big name guys like the likes of Bellinger, Blake Snell, etc., who blinks first? Is it going to be the player basically saying, hey, enough of this, let's just get something done, let's get the spring training? Or are they going to hold out and it's going to be closer? What do you think ends up happening, especially with some of these Boras clients?
I think it depends on who it is. Like, I think a team will blink first with Bellinger because I think what he's holding out for is more explainable, right?
And by the team blinking, you mean like pay up? They'll pony up.
Yeah, that they will pay up because you've got a guy who just posted a remarkably good season, who is a former MVP caliber guy. He's a Gold Glove outfielder and a middle of the order bat. So I think for him, I think they'll pay up. I think what the reports are about Blake Snell wanting like $270 million. No, not gonna happen, son. Like, I know you won the Cy Young, but it wasn't a runaway. You also gave up the most walks per nine of any Cy Young winner ever in the history of baseball. And at the start of the season, didn't look like you were going to win the Cy Young. You had a 72 inning stretch that was remarkable, but you basically won the Cy Young on a third of a season, right? There's still questions about can Blake Snell legitimately go 7 innings and be an ace of a staff routinely. Don't think so. He walks too many guys. Um, there's still a matter of he gives up too much contact and walks dudes to, you know, talk about the Yankees being involved. I know that man should not be in Yankee Stadium as a starting pitcher for the Yankees. Um, so I think it depends. I think bats are easier to explain the bigger price tag because they play every day and they have a tangible effect on the game theoretically 162 times a season. So and pitchers in Boris have a bad history. Like a lot of his dudes go for a lot of money and don't usually let that pay out. I mean, the Nats are still paying for Strasburg's contract for the next 3 years, and that's not going to work out. Pretty sure Corbin is a client of his. That's not working out. So I don't know that Snell's getting what he wants.
When it comes to someone like Blake Snell, let's just focus on him. And it's not even necessarily the player, but I'll say more of the situation. Right now, for ADP data dating back to January 1st, Snell's the 25th pitcher off the board per NFBC data. Now, of course, you probably have, I'm doing a rough count, probably 5 or 6 starters going or relievers going before him. So Snell's being drafted as a top 20 arm right now. At what point, if he remains unsigned, do you start having questions about him in the beginning of the season? Like with position players, they can come in, they get their swings. Sure, maybe a little rusty, a little slow out the gate, but they're okay. But someone like a pitcher, like they need those spring training outings to ramp up so that their first couple starts of the year, maybe they're still only at 75 or so pitches, but that's where they're at and they can develop from there. Like, are we going to see the de facto, like Blake Snell's first 2 or 3 regular season starts, when they're not great performances, are going to quickly be chalked up to, well, these are his spring training outings right here, but they're regular season games? At what point do those concerns start creeping in for you if they haven't already?
I'm to be honest, I've never really been on the
Oh,
Snellzilla,
okay.
bandwagon.
Mhm.
Haven't been a guy. I think when Cash took him out of that World Series game, it completely ruined his confidence that he just can't be trusted.
Mhm.
Um, I've never been a Snell guy. I, the strikeouts are great. Congrats, but it puts so much pressure on the offense to score early to go get you wins in fantasy that it's not, worth it. Not to mention a free agent pitcher. Parks matter to pitchers, man. What happens if
Mhm.
he signs? What happens if he signs in Cincinnati? He is not a ground ball pitcher.
Yeah.
And he signs in the smallest, most hitter friendly park, right? What if Colorado goes out and makes a king offer like they did to Chris Bryant, and now you're stuck with Snell and Coors against loaded offenses of the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks and the Padres, right? Like, I think it matters. What if he's signed by Baltimore? Okay, great park, but still got to face pretty good offenses.
Mhm.
So I'm not on him. I will let others take their shot. If it works out for him, great. But you are using an SP2 slot on a guy who's not signed, has no smoke around him, no talking. And if he doesn't sign until like March, I got one better. What happens if he signs with the team that opens in the Korea series?
Yeah.
That's a week before opening day for the rest of everybody else.
Mhm. So let's
So
do Go
it's
ahead.
to me, it's pointless to waste ADP capital, like draft pick capital, on a guy who's not signed, needs a build up, and then you can't trust but for like half a season.
Let's just for fun then. Rapid fire, yes, no. These are the pitchers going after Blake Snell. Would you take the player that I'll about to name over Blake Snell? Kodai Senga,
Yes,
Grayson Rodriguez,
yes,
Logan Gilbert,
yes,
Bobby Miller,
yes,
Yuri,
yeah, probably.
Jesus Luzardo.
I think that's about the line.
So
but
That's 21.
maybe
That's 21 picks. Oh,
who's
right after
after?
Luzardo, Zach Eflin and Kyle Bradish and Joe Ryan.
I would take Snell before those guys.
So
So
you dropped them
Luzardo,
down 21 spots. You've dropped them a round and a half, or a round and a quarter to a half in 15 team leagues. In 10 team leagues, you drop Snell 2 rounds.
yeah.
Hey, that's what you have to do. That's the exercise when you're determining these players. Like, even when people say, "Oh, I'm completely not drafting him," there's a point where you'll draft the player. I was curious where your point was with Blake Snell, and it's
I mean,
21
in
picks after
terms of
ADP,
yes,
which
I
means
mean,
basically you're not getting him. That's what it means.
fair. I would not intentionally reach for Bradish over Snell. I would look at what hitters are available and
Yes.
whatnot, right?
Mm.
If Snell falls to me and there's no other intriguing hitter left or at a spot that I don't need, I'll take a shot. But I am not going SP2 on Blake Snell, an unsigned guy who, for most of his time in San Diego, didn't look all that spectacular.
Yep. And you say that, and you basically put him in that SP3 range, so you're right on the money. You're not going to use him as an SP2 because you have him as an SP3. You take some other guys ahead of him. So, hey,
I mean, would
you're
you? Where
aligned.
was your stopping line? Are you going to take him where he's going?
Um, it's no. I'm not taking him where he's going. All the guys after him, I would probably take. For me, honestly, he's in that same range where you had him. I'm a little more confident in taking Yuri and Jesus over Blake Snell than you were. You wavered a little bit.
Only
You
because
had to
of
think about it.
the
I'm locked in on those two over him.
well, okay. So the upside, if they hit full potential, then yes, easily, not even a question. We told one of the FA, subscribers in Discord to go for trade Turner for Yuri Perez in a forever keeper league. My only hesitation with Yuri and Lazardo is the innings,
Mhm.
right? Which you also have. Okay, if Snell stays healthy and he only misses a couple of starts at the beginning to warm up, you're still getting more innings. So that was my only hesitation there.
Yeah, and I mean the other way you could look at it too. And again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but you could look at 2021 and 2022. Snell at 128 ish innings, and last year bumped all the way up to 180. So a big jump in workload. If you have concerns about that the year after,
Right.
first. I mean, that's the other thing. That's the other way to look at it. Of course, you and I could go back and forth. Well, if you consider that, I mean, we could do this all day. But I get what you're saying.
Yes.
So it goes both ways, but interesting. Snell is going to be interesting this year. That I will leave it at that. But Matt, last week we talked about when we're getting back to the fantasy baseball mindset, another segment for that this week here. We talked about multi-positional eligibility. We said we talk about it this week and how honestly it can be a slippery slope because is it very nice when setting lineups, especially in daily leagues, even in weekly leagues? Absolutely. Do we sometimes have an unconscious bias of valuing those players a little bit more and that positional eligibility a little bit more? I would say so. Are there times where you get in spots where it's, well, I can put him in multiple places. I'll just take him over this guy. I think that happens. So let's dive into this, how we can properly and effectively use it while not potentially being swayed by taking a worse player who you can put at two different spots over a better player. So, Matt, any other benefits from the multi-positional eligibility other than the fact of the lineup versatility that it gives you?
So I would say that it holds more sway when determining keepers. I
Hmm.
will give a bump to a guy if he's like, I have Spencer Steer as a potential keeper in my home league, right? In my league, he fits first, third corner outfield. Okay. In some other leagues, you'll add a middle infield in there depending on your position eligibility rules. So if he's, let's say, I don't know, a dollar or two more expensive to keep than a guy who only fits one position, but will put up about the same stat line, I'll lean the multi-positional guy because that gives me draft flexibility, right? Let's
Hmm.
say that I plug him in at first base, but then there's a steal at first base later in the draft that I didn't see coming. I can move Steer to let's say outfield in this case because pretty sure my third base spot's going to be taken. right? So it gives you game planning advantage in the draft. When you get to the actual drafts, I am not going to reach for a multi-positional guy. I will not bump them up value-wise mid-draft.
Hmm.
Okay, because then what you're paying for is the same stats you can just slot into different spots. But you're
Hmm.
not getting extra stats, right?
Hmm.
So if a multi-positional guy is way above, and I'm not like dinging Mookie Betts here, right? Obviously, Mookie is an elite guy. He qualifies at short and second and outfield and middle in most leagues,
Hmm.
right? Clearly, that's helpful. But a perfect example, are you going to take Mookie Betts over Ronald Acuna because Acuna only fits outfield and Betts fits 4 spots and they're both first round picks?
Yeah, not in that scenario.
No. Are you going to take Mookie over Freddie Freeman?
I mean, of course, in this example, just because second base is a little iffy, and Mookie at second is heads and
Well, right.
shoulders above others. So honestly, in that one, yeah,
What about Mookie over Bryce, who now qualifies at first base?
yes, I'm taking Mookie over Bryce.
Okay. About Mookie over Soto or Judge?
Both.
Okay. So you have Mookie as basically like your number 2 dude off the board.
He's top four. He's top 4 or 5.
Okay. But you're not
The
taking
only
him over Acuna
I'm
simply
not taking
because
him
he
over
has the
Acuna.
4th
I'm not
spot.
taking him over Witt. Those are the two that
Okay.
so I guess that's the example.
I
I'm
guess
still
Witt's
taking
the
Bobby
guy
Witt over
yeah,
Mookie Betts.
right. But Bobby Witt only qualifies at short. He's still
Yep.
going to outproduce him. So the 4 positions Mookie qualifies for doesn't help you as much as the stats that the 1 position Bobby
Yep.
Witt.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. Like the flexibility is nice, and especially when you get on a site like if you're doing like in the draft guide that we have over at fantasyalarm.com, which you should get your mitts on for the seasons here. Like if you're doing best ball, the multi-positional eligibility doesn't help on underdog best ball. So like in that
Right.
case,
You
you're
only
just taking
qualify
best
at 1.
player. Yes, so you're just
Right.
taking the player there. But like when you get to other leagues, and I think you hit the nail on the head, the multi-positional eligibility shows its benefits as early as the draft. But the one thing as managers that you have to be careful of is just because you take a guy with multi-positional eligibility, and let's say for example, just because this is going to come up, someone like Matt McClain, he's got second and shortstop eligibility.
Right.
I don't think I'm going off the grid here by saying that shortstop is deeper than the second base position.
Correct.
So like as
Second
much as
is
I'm
one
in
of
the
the
draft,
shallowest spots and it's
yes.
right there with first and catcher.
So do I like Matt McClain at his ADP being my second baseman? Sure. But if we're earlier on in the draft and, maybe let's say like a Marcus Semien like happens to fall and I end up taking Semien, then I come back with Matt McClain, I'm not pigeonholing myself into putting Matt McClain at second base. So like you can have these ideas of where a player has eligibility at 2 positions where they are a better value. But even if later on, like I love Tyro Estrada. I love the kid. And like if I draft him at second base, I mean, he's got second base and shortstop eligibility too. So that's maybe not be the best example, but like I'm not going to miss out on someone like that who I truly like just because I already have McClain at second and take a worse shortstop later on. Like use the positional eligibility to your benefit. Yes,
Right.
players will have spots where they seem to be a better value. By the end of the day, whether you put Matt McClain at second base or whether you put him at shortstop, if he goes 3 for 4 with 3 home runs that day, it's the same production. It is
Right.
what it is.
You're not, it's not like we have like second base
There's
premium.
no position multipliers.
Yeah.
Like
There's no
they don't
second
have
base premium in fantasy baseball, right? Like we have a
that.
tight
Yeah.
end, right? Um, yeah, I would agree. I mean, I also tend to believe that you can use middle and corner as kind of catch-alls to, well, these guys are
Yes.
lower tier, they wouldn't be starters, but I like them, so I'm going to fit them,
Mhm.
right? Um, but I agree. I'm not going to again reach for a guy because oh, I have this spot open and I really like him and I want to plop that guy in because then it doesn't all you've done then is just eaten value because you reached for a guy that still fits other play. Like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say that going into a draft is when they have huge value.
Mhm.
And then obviously during the season they come in handy because if you have a guy get injured, you can slot others in there. But this is all about when you draft, don't specifically reach for multi-positional guys because they are multi-positional. Like we were saying with Mookie Betts. If you genuinely believe that Betts' total stat line helps you more than a guy like Bryce Harper or Soto or Freeman or Judge, fine. But don't reach for him over Witt or Acuna because, ooh, I can play Mookie all over the place. Yeah, guess what? He still has to be in the lineup to be able to play. It doesn't,
Mhm.
right? That doesn't necessarily help you if they're not in the lineup. So,
Yeah, the one situation I'll kind of add to that here when it comes to the multi-positional eligibility, keeping up to date with the happenings and the reports coming out of spring training, because there could be players who shortly into the season gain eligibility. That could be very important. Like we've seen it in past years. I mean, he had it going into the season, but like Dalton Varsho. Dalton Varsho, the fantasy catcher, big thumbs up. Dalton Varsho, a fantasy outfielder, eh,
yeah, he's
kind
only
of
his value came. So, yeah, this is a great point. Varsho's value came from the fact that you could qualify him at catcher and thus made him what, number 2 behind Real Muto?
yes, he was basically drafted as second catcher because
Or
of that.
top 3 along with, before Adley Rutschman, you had Will Smith in there, right? So,
Mhm.
but if you put him in outfield and then you go and put a catcher stat line in an outfield, all of a sudden he's like your outfield 4
Yep.
on your team, which means he's like, you know, very deep in the draft. He's no longer a top 4 round pick because he's lost catcher eligibility. So now you're going to see Varsho's value plummet, even though the stat line was the same, all because he doesn't qualify at the shallowest position in baseball, right?
He was,
Also,
yeah,
why Mookie's value has shot up because he qualifies at second. Bryce Harper's value has shot up. I mean, Bryce is still good, but if he was only outfield, you probably take him in the second round.
mhm.
Now that he's first, he's a first round pick. He's added an entire round because he qualifies at a shallow spot.
And Varsho last year routinely, like we said, second catcher off the board. And when you look at it, 220 average, 20 homers, and 16 stolen bases last year as an outfielder, it's like, and a 285 OBP. That, I mean, the homers and steals were nice, but that average stunk. Now, if I tell you that a catcher did that, you'd be jumping through the moon.
Right,
You'd be
because
so
you already
excited.
know that you expect bad averages from catchers because they don't usually put them up, right?
Yep.
In a roto league, a bad average from a catcher, you know that going into a draft, you're going to have to eat that. So yes,
Yep.
a nearly 2020 season from a catcher. That's why he was the second catcher off the board.
And like this year, despite the Pirates signing Yasmani Grandal here recently, it might be a little bit longer till Henry Davis gets the catcher eligibility, but his fantasy outlook with his profile as a catcher makes him a steal in drafts. However, it might be now instead of 4 weeks, it might be 6 to 8 weeks before he gets that. Because I think early on to try to ease the burden on him, I do think they'll do close to a split just to kind of ease Davis into the season. But he'll get to most leagues are like 20 games in season. He'll
Yes.
get to that point and he'll get that. So like that'll be a nice value for him. But I still like his price in drafts. He's still a sleeper in the fantasy baseball draft guy, a player you should look at in the later rounds. So go take a look at that. But then on the other hand, not all multi-positional eligibility is a massive benefit. Like Chris Bryant made a handful of appearances at first base last year. He's getting first base this year, but he doesn't have the power that he did. But like he hasn't shown the power again. And like from the
He's
corner
also
infielder, we
hurt.
want the power. Like, does Chris Bryant getting first base matter? Other than when you set your lineups and he's a value in drafts because he's going later. But like, I mean, does him getting first base help?
I mean, maybe a little. I would say third is probably deeper, so him retaining third base or outfield, you're more likely, I guess, to reach for a guy with Bryant's upside if he's healthy and everything clicks and he hits home runs in cores, which he can't seem to do, which is amazing. Um, I guess there's a little more value at first, only because of the scarcity of good fantasy first basemen, but I mean, we're talking like around after the 15th round in the draft. So you're taking flyers at that point. It's not like he's going
Yeah.
from the 8th to the 7th and as a core piece of your build, right? Um, so that I will say one note about anticipated position eligibility.
Mhm.
It's great to go into a draft with, oh, well, at some point this season, I can move this guy from this spot to this spot. Okay. But does that actually help you in the draft?
Mhm.
Because that guy still has to take up that spot. So you either are drafting a dude who's going to sit on the bench because you can't play him in that spot until maybe a month into the season, right? Or what if the guy gets hurt and doesn't accrue enough spots that your whole plan doesn't help? Like,
Mhm.
it's just one of those things where yes, you can try to anticipate it, but if it doesn't happen, you're still, you know, stuck in the mud with a guy that you drafted who you may not be able to use.
And keep in mind, if you draft Henry Davis to be your catcher until he gets catcher eligibility, you have to have another catcher. Someone else
Right,
has to fill that spot. You can't just put a 0 there for weeks.
right.
Can't
So
do
then
that.
you're eating outfield, production in the hopes that, hey, when this guy goes to catcher, his value goes through the roof. Yeah, but you're going to eat a month of the season at least,
Yep. Yep.
maybe two.
It's interesting. It's a very interesting concept to kind of go around, and you got to play it. You got to play it safe sometimes and look at it, or you got to hope that the Pirates, basically Grandal, is the second catcher and they let Davis catch 5 games a week so that we get it within the first month.
Yeah,
That's what you ultimately have to hope
basically.
for. But yeah, so if you, like I said, if you haven't got your hands on the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball Draft Guide, make sure you check that out. You can go to fantasyalarm.com/pricing/draft guide 2469 for the draft guide, or you can just get the cheat sheets, or you can become an all pro member. You get access to the Discord as well as all the good stuff that we have at Fantasy Alarm. So make sure you check it out. But Matt, last week we did the NL East, posted on Twitter, got some engagements. I believe that my team had a higher vote in terms of who teams liked it more. So let's say that vote is that. So I won the NL East. We'll obviously track it throughout the year, but at least at first glance, I won that.
I
So we
mean,
are going to move to the NL
based
Central
on the public, yes, but based on actual stats, we'll have to play
for
this out and
sure,
see how
for sure,
see
for
how it
sure.
goes.
Absolutely. But this week, NL Central, and just a quick reminder so that you can play along as well. Make sure you let Matt and I know on X at the Selz Man and at Colby R. Conway your picks for the NL Central. But once again, catcher, infielder, outfielder, starter, reliever, all from the NL Central, no more than one player per team. So you can't have Juan Soto and George Springer because they're the same position. Can't have Juan Soto and Gleyber Torres because they are both Yankees. Only one player from there. So, like in this one, you can't have Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado because one, they're both Cardinals. Two,
Both are
they're
good.
both infielders. And three, their ADP is inside the top 175. And the players' ADPs that we select dating back to January 1st must be outside the top 175 players overall, except for catcher, because otherwise we would be pretty much stuck to the builds that we could do. So catcher is fair game. Positional eligibility is indicated by NFBC to begin the season, and we'll do standard ESPN scoring, which does include holds, which you'll see quite often with the relievers that we pop up. So NL Central, Matt, I will let you go first with the catcher.
So this was a fun division. You got a bunch of mediocre teams, which tends to mean there's a lot of mediocre draft picks for fantasy out there. So there were a few teams. There was a bunch of ways we could go with this. I actually wound up making 4 different ones. I'm going to go with one that we know isn't going to cause overlap here for the fun, so that we can get a clearer vote. So for catcher, I stuck with the rule. I'm going Tyler Stevenson from the Reds. He's going off at 227 in drafts since
Mm-hmm.
January 1st. Guy has a pretty decent average for a catcher. He's in a very nice ballpark with a good lineup around him. He, produces a decent amount of pop. What I like to see more than, I think it was like 13 homers from him last year. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But, he's going to put up some home runs. He's going to drive in some runs, put up a pretty decent average for me at catcher. So I'm going Stevenson.
William Contreras would be the obvious pick here, but I went with Wilson Contreras. Good year last year. Season was cut short due to a wrist injury, and actually over his final 201 plate appearances last year prior to the injury, he was actually slashing 339, 440, 619, 36 RBIs across those as well. So he was doing very, very well. I wouldn't be surprised this year. It should be another 20-plus home run season for the fourth straight time. Should hit around 250-ish, and I do believe that the Cardinals' offense bounces back, and he should challenge his career high in RBI this year as well. So I went with Wilson Contreras behind the dish. I'll go ahead. We'll serpentine this or snake draft, however you want to do this. Infield for me, we talked about it off air. I was holding out that y'all drafting in the NFBC would push Brian Hayes down a little bit.
You missed by 0.9 spots. He's going off at 174.15 since
I know,
January
Matt.
3rd.
I'm aware. I've been stalking it for the past week since we did the NL East because I was praying that he would come below 175 just so I could take him, but I couldn't.
All weekend, hoping.
Yep. I've been grinding, trying to get that ADP down, but no, I'm just kidding. I haven't. But once I couldn't get Brian Hayes, it was really easy for me. I'm going Rhys Hoskins, newcomer to the Milwaukee lineup, big time power, good home park, good lineup around him. And honestly, even if it's just another status quo year for Hoskins, 240 to 250-ish batting average, flirt with 30 home runs in a really good ballpark in a good lineup as well. Also, get back to hitting the fly ball a little bit more compared to the last time we saw him. That'd be great. And if that's the case, Hoskins is an absolute steal. His ADP is actually up to 200, and I wouldn't be surprised if that keeps moving up just with the news of him going to Milwaukee. So Rhys Hoskins is my infielder.
When I looked at it this morning, he's at 195.
Yep.
Now as of this morning. So he's moving on up. I had a couple of builds with Rhys Hoskins. Again, switched it up so that we didn't have any overlap because it's way more fun to vote on different teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to knock out the Cardinals here, and I'm going to go Nolan Gorman at 189 in the ADP. Guy's got all sorts of pop, right? That's what we all know him from coming up. He's going to fit at second base. He can play a little bit of everywhere if they need him to. Want to see the average come up a little bit from where it was. He did actually steal a decent amount of bags last year, which in a points format definitely helped because you get a decent amount of points for steals. Hitting fifth or sixth in that Cardinals lineup should be prime for a bunch of run production. So I'm going to go with Nolan Gorman for infield. And then since we're serpentining, here comes my pirate here, Colby. Jack Sawinski in outfield.
Mm-hmm.
He's going off at 238. Guy had a really underrated season. I know that he had second half wasn't great for him there towards the end. He also didn't hit lefties all that well, but luckily for him, there's not that many lefties in that division. Put up, pretty good combo of power and speed for me. Obviously, Pirates lineup not the best in the division. We'll put it that way. So run production a little less than others, but I'll go with the power speed. Nice batting average. Take Jack Sawinski.
Really interesting about Sawinski. Horrible strikeout rate last year. But when you look at Baseball Savant, 96 percentile chase rate. He understands the zone. Could you imagine Sawinski cuts back the strikeouts a little bit?
Yeah, he has no willpower.
With the 94th percentile barrel rate from last year and 75th percentile X slug. Anyway, I like Sawinski, and I'm going to be a sucker for Nolan Gorman as well this year, especially if the offseason, if he can cut down on some of those dreaded back issues that popped up last season. Gorman was basically my infield was going to be Nolan Gorman, Rhys Hoskins, or Brian Hayes. That's where it was going to be, but obviously Hayes was removed from that, so I didn't get to use him. Speaking of streaky outfielders, since you mentioned one, I'm going to go to the Cubs with Christopher Morel. He's going to have the outfield eligibility. He's going to play all over the darn field for the Cubs at various points throughout this year. Probably DH some too. Here's the thing with Christopher Morel, and I know those that were in our Discord last year know that I was very anti-Christopher Morel. I said, you got to be careful. He's as streaky as they come, but in 107 games last season, 26 home runs, 17 doubles, only 6 stolen bases. Definitely thought the speed would come along more, but I mean, it's hard to complain about that when the power has been exceptional for him. But here's the thing. Quantity of contact is not very good. There is a lot of issues there. Quality of contact, when he does make contact, very good. Really, really like that. But here's the thing. I wrote about this, I believe, in the player capsules, which will be coming out on the site here soon. But when the going is good for Morel, it is very, very good. Like we saw back in 19 May games last year, 9 home runs, 296 average. However, when the going is rough, it's really rough. Like that
Very rough.
149 average and 37% strikeout rate in the month of August. They're going to play him because a lot of times he's just so streaky that they're going to ride him out and hope for the best. I'm just hoping any little improvement in the contact rate just to, if we can avoid these streaks that are like way up here, but then way down here, and maybe just go to like here and here, maybe I would take that. I would take that with Morel. I will lower the ceiling a little bit to raise the floor, and I will be
There you
okay
go.
with it. But at his price point, it's worth the risk. I've come around a little bit on him this year. Starting pitcher, if you have your hands on the draft guide, you'll know this. I'm all in on Frankie Montas. We talked about Blake Snell potentially not being good. He hasn't signed with the Reds, but if he were to, his pitcher profile does not align with that park well. Montas's does. As long as that right shoulder is healthy, ground ball guy, that'll help him in Great American Ballpark. Good defense behind him. And honestly, when you look at a lot of his numbers, I think there's more to be had in the strikeout department with Frankie Montas. I think there's a little bit more. His career 24.2% strikeout rate is solid. I think there's a little more meat on the bone. I think he can push that up a little bit this year in the Reds, even if it's a bad park. Strike some guys out, keep the ball on the ground. He'll be just fine. And he's going so late in drafts. He's basically free, so he's worth the shot. So that's why I'm going to go with Montas as my starter. What say you?
Yeah, so I landed on Montas in a few different builds. I also landed on Morel a couple of times. The Cubs and Reds seem to be good for like any category in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of figuring out who you liked from other ones. So on that note, I'm going to go with a Japanese import here for my starting pitcher. I'm going to go
Oh,
with Shoto Imanaga. He's going off at 207 right now in NFBC ADP since Jan 1. He should be the Cubs' number 2 starter, which is fine with me. Yes, there's an adjustment there. I think it'll be easier for a lefty because there's not a lot of lefty strikeout guys in baseball. That's what Imanaga brings. He's also on the older side, so it's not like you've got a maturity there with him when he comes over that you may not see elsewhere. So I like Imanaga. I think he's going to be a candidate for a decent amount of wins. The strikeouts are nice. I think the ratios will be solid. I'm perfectly fine getting him at 207 where he's coming off the board. And to finish it off, reliever is odd. Usually we're relying on holds in this scoring because closers, unless they're so dicey you don't want to take them, are not going outside the top 175. I'm going with Joel Payamps from the Brewers because that was my only team left to go with. He was the setup guy to airbender Devin Williams last year. Had a really nice, had a pretty solid year, to be honest. The ERA, the WHIP was nice. Strikeout rates were good. He got 27 holds. He got a couple of saves. So I'm looking in mostly to get the holds there. But if they do happen to move on from Devin Williams, then that guy's probably the first guy up for saves. He's going at 612 in ADP. So in some leagues, he's not even being drafted. Let's just put it that way.
Hey, if it's free, it's for me. And I'll tell you one thing with Payams too. Last year, career best strikeout rate. Switched the pitch mix a little bit, delved into the slider usage more, and it was effective. Very good whiff rate on that pitch. I do like him a lot, but I liked Rhys Hoskins more. So that took the Brewers off the board for me. And of course, yes, I have not picked the Pirate yet.
Yep.
Definitely thought I would have tried to sneak in a team of all 5 Pirates here, but you might have been a little too smart for me to sneak that one by. But I'm going to go with the Roldis Chapman. Again, we're using ESPN standard scoring, holds count. So we're going to get points there. Chapman gets strikeouts. The Pirates should be at least a half decent team this year, I would think. There's enough there to win some games.
A lot of close games.
Yeah, they will play a lot of close games. And like David Bednar is going to be the closer. I'm not arguing that at all or refuting that, but it's one of those things. Do they give Chapman a couple of more save chances to try to maybe deal him at the deadline because he is on a 1-year deal, goes to a better contending team? Ooh, that's another thing we should consider. If we have guys get traded, their stats still count. I have executive decision. They're basically, when we did this, that's when they're locked in.
Yeah.
But I mean, here's the thing. He should get innings, strikeouts, holds, couple of saves here from there. I think Chapman's a fine target. He's going outside of the top 400, and I needed a Pittsburgh reliever, and I couldn't get David Bednar, so I'll take the next best one.
There you go. I had Chapman in a few builds myself. He's arguably better as a setup guy in terms of ratios. And if they do happen to move Bednar, then you're getting saves from Chapman, probably, maybe. I don't know.
I would if Bednar goes, Chapman's going too.
Well, you would assume, but they've
I would assume.
uh,
But hey,
you never
what do
know
I
what
know?
the front office of the Pirates are gonna do, to be honest.
Honestly, for better or for worse, you are 100% correct. You never know. You never know exactly what's going to happen. But that's the breakdown there for the NL Central. Matt went with Tyler Stevenson, Nolan Gorman, Jack Sawinski, Shoto Imanaga, Joel Payamps. I went Wilson Contreras, Reese Hoskins, Christopher Morel, Frankie Montas, and Aroldis Chapman, the Pittsburgh Great. Make sure you head over to fantasyalarm.com. Get your hands on the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball Draft Guide. You can get that for under $25 there. You can also just get the cheat sheet if that's all you want, made by Howard Bender and company, or join annual, get in the Discord, ask us your questions, help you out with the drafts, keepers, sleepers, busts, anything like that. We will be there to help. Make sure you give Matt a follow over on X at the Selz Man. I am at Colby R. Conway, and we will see you next week with the newest edition of Caught Stealing, the Fantasy Alarm